Everyone in the audience, this is a room about if you knew all that you knew about the tongue, an osteopathic view. Michelle is here giving us her valuable time to answer questions and give you support and love and guidance. Stand in her power, and we'll go from there. Michelle, how does that sound?
That sounds
And
amazing, because I certainly I didn't prepare anything. I'm really good with Q&A. I really, I'm fueled by people's curiosity and just meeting them where they're at. I mean, I've been a family practice doctor now. I got my degree in 2000. And then I guess it was 2005 that I started seeing patients and working with the dentist, Eric Nordstrom, who developed the osteopathic approach to orthodontics, which doesn't use force. It uses setting up the force vectors in the body to allow the tongue to create enough space for all the functions of the face. Like, yes, there becomes enough room for the teeth to not only look right cosmetically, but also function well in terms of jaw function and creating enough space for good breathing, and even allowing for the balance of the inner ear and the vision system. And so I really went on instinct that this was something that I really needed to know. And I would say at least 50% of patients with anything have a big unidentified component related to this that's standing in the way of them and full wellness. It's huge. I am a medical doctor, 7 years of medical school, and I went to an osteopathic medical school, which is maybe 11% of the schools, or is it 11% of the medical doctors in the nation come from this osteopathic route. And then of the physicians trained in osteopathic schools, really only a tiny percentage end up truly embracing the roots of the philosophy of osteopathic medicine, which dates back to the mid 1800s. So what is it? It's basically looking at the body as a complex interplay of mechanics and energetics and circulation. It's basically biomimicry medicine. How does the body actually work? And if we are able to assist it in restoring to full function in all of those areas, that it has the ability to basically self-correct. But I was taught in medical school that the physiologic range of respiration rate, the rate at which we breathe, is 14 to 18 breaths per minute, which is more than double what the optimal range really is, which is really, we'd like it under 10. If we're truly optimized, which means we're actually coupled with the pulse of the earth, we're breathing at around 5.5 cycles per minute. And this is it's a different state than we live in Western culture. The potential for wellness, that it's really a nervous system thing, like the tongue palate relationship and the refinement of that whole function. And what becomes possible in terms of retraining the physiology, it's basically yoga. It's resetting the body to be able to rest in that deeply embodied, earth entrained, integrated state between the physical body and subtle body. And it can become quite a spiritual idea, in that one of the things that I've learned from correlating in the teachings of Vedic philosophy, for instance, is that the roof of the mouth is actually considered a location of a chakra, and it provides a gateway of communication between the heart and the higher centers. So right tongue function conceivably could open the door to more intuitive abilities and connection with our higher selves and higher knowing. So there's actually a parking place for the tongue on the roof of the mouth. There's that rough area in the front, maybe a centimeter from the teeth. And in people with physiologic, meaning normal, it's rare to find this actually. So it's not exactly normal, but it's the healthy default is this natural cave toward the front of the mouth where the tongue naturally seats itself and is meant to rest all the time unless you're speaking or eating. Swallow, smile, and sleep are more related than you think. So, what happens is that because we don't breastfeed as much, right? And bottle feeding doesn't provide the same amount of suction and work that happens against the palate to create this nice, spacious roof of the mouth. Um, there's so many other reasons why the face would be crowded. Dietary, nutritional, not chewing because our food is now soft. So we don't have that vertical force in that we call it vertical power. And that's the combination of swallowing and chewing that actually grows the face forward and down and creates enough space for everything. So here's the take home message on this. If your tongue were not derailed in some way from its natural work, you would not need orthodontics. The face would develop enough space for the teeth to come in properly, and there also to be enough room for air to move in the back of the throat. Because when we don't grow the face forward and down by this right tongue action, we actually don't grow. Airway doesn't become as large. This is huge. Academically speaking, and ideally, the tongue would not touch, the tip of the tongue would not touch the teeth, but very few people have room for that. I would say the contact to the center of the palate, there's an actual meeting place of four bones there, and the sphenoid, which is the main cranial structure that kind of is it's the junction that determines tight, not tight, or breath, not breath, or energy or not energy running in the whole body, is that center of the skull. So this tongue contact on the palate, kind of with every swallow, it's about a pound of pressure running vertically. If the tongue is doing its right job, there's this little nudge on the sphenoid that keeps that sphenobasilar symphysis, to get really technical, that has the whole skeleton kind of be able to pulse rhythmically, and behave more like a behavior than an object. Like the whole skeleton needs to breathe. The whole body is never static in its way of being, for a better way of putting it. There's nothing solid about us, and to the extent that we can live connected to our fluid essence moment to moment, then, like, the thing I keyed in on that you said was this tension that you hold in your sleep, even though your mouth is closed and you're thinking your tongue is kind of in the right place. So there's some way that your body registered vigilance or defense, and either it's patterned into the nervous system, or there's kind of a habituation that your whole skeleton made to reflect the nervous system state that has to be retrained in the reverse direction. And the first thing that I thought of, and that came into mind when you're speaking, is buteyko breathing, as a way to kind of retrain the nervous system back down. And then whatever the nervous system's doing, the life force circulation is doing. And then whatever the life force circulation is doing, then the structure is, its form follows function. The structure begins to reflect that freedom and flow in the subtle body. That's the order of things. That's a little bit of the osteopathic secret sauce that it's also, it's understood in the Eastern approaches to medicine, but that's the most non-Western part. Yeah.
That's fantastic. I think there's a lot there for me to learn.
Say that we are shifting from being a chronic mouth breather to a nose breather, and we have these symptoms of potential crowding of the teeth, or we have, the airway has been obstructed. What in our adult form, because I know a lot of this sort of the jawline sort of forms as we grow up, but as we're an adult now, what are some of the remedies that we can move through? Like, for example, you've talked about shifting your breathing habits, and I know, the osteo block is an example of something else. I was wondering, what are some of the things that we could be looking out for to shift this?
There's so much to say about it, and want to tell everyone that I wrote an article that summarizes basically a do-it-yourself approach, and then indications for referral as well, that comes from that piece that Jordan grabbed that picture from. So if what we're saying doesn't land or you don't capture it, one thing that could be cool is if people go and reference that article and then harvest their questions there, and then we can circle back and do part B of this. Okay. So I want to make a point here to everyone that that we can all at any age go between these two formations. And this is where we get into the quantum thing, because the word on the street is that, to really reform a face, you have to be a young person that's still growing. However, when you get into this opening up of the life force circulation and literally shifting the density and fluidity of structures, and we know this is possible because we see these ancient yogis and, Tai Chi masters doing this really fluid movement as though they're not solid well into their later years. Now, most of us don't move this much chi, but if you want to be a person who basically remodels their anatomy later in life, the possibility exists if you are able to open up the meridians and get that chi flowing and literally remodel the bones. So what do I do as an osteopath? And as Dr. Daniel Reiters was saying, that the form of osteopathy that I practice and Dr. Carmine Van Deven practices that Daniel just interviewed is kind of this more energetic, more esoteric, not mechanical, definitely almost a shamanic practice where you touch in and have a relationship with and go on a journey with the subtle body, such that I don't actually do anything. I hold space for the body to express in this way and almost refresh to some original capacity, the design of which may be lost under several layers of dissociation. So we go to connect the person as you would with meditative practices or yogic practices that are able to really help the individual get back in touch with their spiritual self or their subtle body, physical body integration. So when you can render yourself moldable, that's kind of the esoteric piece, then you start to work with the tongue, with exercises. Like, I try to make it fun and enjoyable and not too tedious. I have people, and this is really Carly's domain.
In terms of, we can change it and we can make a shift here even in adulthood. And yeah, do it yourself, not just do it yourself, but so like the tongue practices, for example, and the changing of the airways, but also devices. And I would add, that malleability that you're talking about, would that connect to teeth crowding as well? Do you think that is reversible in this sort of way that you're talking about?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have this happen all the time. My own child, that her orthodontist said, "Oh, she'll be needing braces for sure." And I was like, yeah, I don't think so. But we just went about, and Carly knows this because she treated my child, and my daughter is not the most disciplined kid. And I didn't even treat her that much, and she didn't do most of her homework. And still, somehow, the body just receiving a little nudge in the right direction seemed to draw on its memory for right function. It's really remarkable what the body's capable of. I want to remind you guys all of that.
Like that innate regeneration and getting back to a state of homeostasis, that if you just get out of your own way, the body's going to get back there if you remove the barriers. But it's so empowering listening to what you say, because it makes sense to me. It just makes innate sense. Jean, welcome to the stage. Feel free to drop any questions if you have any.
I'll make this really short because I'm excited to hear what Carly would have to say as well, but I'm curious about how the work of Weston Price overlaps with this osteopathic view. I'm sure, Michelle, you must know who he is and his work, and as a dentist and early anthropologist, that's how I've stumbled across his work.
I wrote a lot about this in the one piece that I wrote only because I didn't find a better, more succinct source anywhere, that's on my website. So it's all about that. In fact, if I I found a video on YouTube that it's a lay produced, not particularly scientific or medical, although it does include some. It's called Attractive or Not. And it kind of goes through the whole arc of back maybe 150 years and includes how Weston Price, you know, this dentist who traveled the globe and looked at all of these uh, tribal communities whose facial proportions and development were really superior to Westerners. And and so from that he derived that there were these practices called the traditions, the nourishing traditions of these different communities, and that was the culmination of this book. Well, his book, and then many that have come since. And a lot of it has to do, as I think I referenced before you got on, with the nutrient levels, but also the ways that we eat. Don't have to work as hard to break down processed food, like we don't have to chew that much. Um, and simply how over time, and James Nestor, the journalist, went into this in depth in his brilliant book Breath that we talked about when the room opened, that the skulls of humans have simply deteriorated in their integrity in terms of over the last multiple decades, and it's continuing to go in a not so great direction. And so Weston Price wouldn't be happy with what he's seeing now. We certainly haven't turned the trajectory around.
I was told that in order to make your tongue stronger, you should take the tip of your tongue to the roof of your mouth and then slide it back so that it's curling back, and, so to speak, the bottom of the tongue is on the roof of your mouth. And I'm wondering what you thought about that.
That's a great exercise to kind of stretch out your lingual frenum in one of its positions, but and it's an okay exercise. I think there's many better ways, but it's an exercise. I wouldn't say that's the one. I'll tell you one of my favorites. I mean, everything's case dependent because people need different things. Some people go a lot of people go asymmetrical only across their mouth. They have, their teeth will be off. Usually if the tongue moves in a little bit off center so that your teeth don't really match up. So I have a dental background, so we kind of look at the whole thing, and then then the jaw gets a part of it, and then it can move to the neck. So it just kind of keeps flowing through the body. But the teeth and the tongue is kind of where I hold my focus, in the jaw, those three places. But yeah, that's an exercise. I call that slippery slide back. That's just an old exercise I've been doing for years. I use it a lot after a frenectomy, a release of the frenum. Sometimes that's real tethered, and we either laser or surgically release it. But it's one of the stretching exercises for the frenum is what I use it for. And it also it reaches the styloglossus muscle, which is the muscle that lifts the tongue up and pulls it back up into the mouth where it should be. And that one's really weak on everybody. So it kind of accesses that one a bit. So it's a good exercise, actually, the more I think about it.
So when you say take the tongue on the roof of your mouth, are you taking the top of your tongue, the entire top of your tongue on the roof of your mouth then?
You mean as what we want ideally in an ideal world?
Yes.
Yes. We want most of the tongue to live on the roof of the mouth. On an adult, sometimes we get, as much as we can. I shoot for the whole thing. I try to get the whole tongue up on everybody, because if it's not all the way up, then a little bit's down, and that can, interfere with something or another. On a kid, it's easy because they develop right in front of you. You can just watch them grow their own palates. The tongue is very forceful. It works with a lot of other cranial muscle or facial muscles, and the power is unbelievable. It's designed to create the face. That's what it does. And it gets thrown off so many ways, and it doesn't go up to the palate, and the faces don't get developed. This is the whole premise of malocclusion and crooked teeth and retruded jaws. So when we get the facial function normalized on a child, they can grow their own faces, at least to their genetic potential, and widen those kids, yes, whole tongue. Adults, some people come to me with some pretty some hard anatomy to deal with. They just, depending on how vaulted their palate is, or how tethered their tongue is. So we always do the best we can, but most of the time I make it work. It's just, if you want to work hard enough, we can get it up there. And
Thank you.
with one more note, if you have a great osteopath, so this is where a great osteopath comes in, because the powerful, like somebody like Michelle is so magical, and I can work a face and I can get the nervous system going. So I get the cranial nerves integrated to the nerves, to the brainstem, and that creates maximum oxygen to the brain. So now the person starts the flow that Michelle talks about all the time. And then you put somebody in the hands like hers, and they just kind of melt. We can just kind of change those faces. Now, this is not something that happens all the time. Believe me, I've never seen really any other osteopath be able to do it but her, honestly. But we do it in our little small group. And it's not something you can go out and find. And, if you ask your orthodontist about this stuff, they would probably send you out the door and think you were crazy. But this is stuff that if you work with the body the way we do, you can get results, really nice results.
Thank you.
Sure.
I want to say that I'm not the only one. And the discipline that covers this melting, remodeling, organic remodeling of the structure is a small segment of osteopathy that Dr. Reiters alluded to, that Dr. Carmine Van Devin is a part of. It's biodynamic osteopathy. So maybe it's 5% of osteopaths who work at this energetic level. And it's an interface of imparting force and then stepping back and letting the body breathe. It's not all fluid. Like I do quite a bit of, sometimes I'll melt a face and then I'll just get an impulse from the body to grab something and pull it. And sometimes I find myself like jaws of life, like opening up the bones of the face. And it sounds kind of radical, but when it's guided by the body, my nervous system is so anchored and so still and so in response to something that I trust completely. So it is, in order to do this, even the structural parts, being able to tune into my own entrained and grounded and intuitive state is an essential piece.
Michelle, that's exactly what it sounds like to me, right? As Carly is giving you all this amazing love, it sounds like you are tuning into your higher purpose, your higher passion, the things that sort of get you switched on. The reason that you're in this work, I'm assuming here, is because you love to do it. And when you're in that sort of loving, joyous state, it's helping you connect to those intuitive choices that you're making, it sounds like. It makes total sense to me.
Absolutely. All driven by the heart, honestly. That's a whole nother layer of the conversation. I wanted to say two things that came up. One is that these different, this is to speak to your question, Gina, that the tribal peoples of the planet that have clicking in their languages and lots of forceful sounds that they make with their languages have phenomenal facial development. A lot of movement and diversity with tongue functions and forces happening. So one of the exercises I give people is to practice being one of those people. Like I play this game with my daughter where we speak in tongues and we do this. Well, not exactly in tongues, but we pretend we speak one of these languages, or we'll do percussion in the car to songs with the tongue on the palate, with suctioning. And I describe that in the little piece that I wrote on my website. It's because I find that the things that people really enjoy that involve some element of play and also collaboration with others are the things that will more naturally gravitate toward and are likely to succeed, even for the element of enjoyment that elevates the body in response to anything that we do.
Sorry, this is Heather speaking again. Do we have time for one more quick question? Harrison, are you cool?
Heather.
Okay, just while I've got Michelle and Carly here. So a few years back, I kept catching my teenage son making this incredibly hilarious face when he was kind of like chilling on his own. And I asked him what he was doing, and he called it, if I remember correctly, he called it mewing or mewing or something, and he said it was something with the way that he pressed his tongue to the roof of his mouth to help strengthen and shape his jaw. Is that correct? Is that an exercise that can be done at to help like strengthen or set a jaw?
Dr. Mew is a very, very famous dentist in England who started a lot of this thought process many, many years ago. And he's been one of my mentors for a long time. So he's obviously got some movements they call mewing. I'm thinking that's what you're talking about. So, I've just studied a lot of his work, and he's taught me on some classes years ago. But so I don't know exactly what exactly your son was doing, but I'm thinking that's where it came from. That'd be my first. I think it's what's his first name? I'll Google it real fast while we're here.
Michael Mew is the younger of the.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh. So he must have stumbled across him because he said he watched some videos and did some reading, and he's been doing it for probably close to 3 years now. I don't notice him doing it as much. He's 16 now, but definitely he did it quite often, and he said he tries to do it a few times a day. Like an exercise program for himself. So I just I had never heard of it before, and this group just kind of reminded me of what he had sort of explained to me. So it's good to know that perhaps he had stumbled across something that's been helpful for him. So thank you again for this room.
Michelle, if you had anything to add with that, feel free to jump in. I just think it's funny. That's how we started this room, Jordan. We were talking about mewing, and that's how the idea began. Go for it, Michelle.
Yeah, sure. Are we trying to end soon, or do we launch into some? I have a little bit more time. I don't know what your plan was for the closing.
I unfortunately have to run to a meeting, so I think we'll close it off in a couple of minutes, if that's okay with you. But we'll definitely be doing this again.
Yeah, I'm really grateful for the John and Mike Mew, senior and junior, because there's such accessibility, and there is such a diversity of videos on YouTube, including younger folks like mewing influencers who do these successive check-ins on their own progress, and they just make it really cool. So I found captured a few links of some of the ones that I love. But if you watch one thing, there's a video on YouTube called Attractive Face, Attractive or Not. And it goes into all the Weston Price stuff, and it goes into the timelines and trajectories of some of these YouTube influencers. It's maybe 12 minutes long. It's super entertaining. It really captures the attention and imagination of kids and adults alike. I just love really high yield things that get the point across really quickly so that people get on board and we don't lose them.
And Michelle, maybe you could explain very quickly what the parameters are for mewing. So I know that a part of it is the tongue on top of the mouth, as we've been talking about so far in this chat, but there's also a part of the teeth to do with it as well. Like in my understanding, it's bringing the front teeth to be meeting together, and the back teeth, a big part of it. Does that make sense?
That's for sure. Carly would be the better answer of that.
So really, here's your resting face. Okay, this is really the one thing to take from the meeting, and it takes strength to get here. But you can start with the first half inch of your tongue should lift and kind of settle in gently about 1/4 of an inch behind your front teeth. It should not touch any of your front teeth. Your tongue should really never touch any teeth, because it will move your teeth, and that means you're going in the wrong direction. You want to go vertically up. Your teeth should be parted about 2 to 3 millimeters. That's the thickness of a coin. So that's our freeway space in the dental world, and that's a gentle, and these are all reflexed. And then the lips just gently sealed, and that will force you to nasal breathe eventually, and you eventually put more and more of your tongue up. So that kind of is going to sum up a lot of mewing right there. Wow.
Well, maybe it's about the percentage of dependence on soft cooked foods
Yeah.
because, yeah, to the extent that we've gone in that direction, we've definitely been undergrowing our faces radically for many decades. And then the dietary thing is fairly large, and I referenced some papers in the piece that those two images are from that Jordan and Harrison have up on their icons from an article that's right on my website front page, the link to which is in my Instagram bio, which is in my Clubhouse bio. If you touch my picture, you can scroll down and find that.
And I think just to jump in there too, and then we'll move down to Heather with her question. It's also the chewing, just from this osteopathic sort of facial and teeth perspective, so important, as we've just been talking about. But from a digestive perspective as well, getting down into the gut, the more that we chew, the more that we activate. A lot of us think that our digestion begins when the food hits the gut, but the digestion begins in the mouth when we're activating not only the enzymes in the mouth to break down the food, but the enzymes, the chewing motion then corresponds to the gut to be ready for the food, right? So the more that we chew, the more that we digest and assimilate and take on nutrients, and that whole cycle enhances. So for anyone listening, this is so important, and I'm just so grateful that Michelle and Carly are here today to really promote this conversation, because I love it. With that, I do want to keep the ball rolling. We are going to go for another 15, 20 minutes in this room before I have to run to another meeting. Heather, thank you for coming up on stage. We'd love to give you the space with any questions you had for Michelle or Carly.
Thank you, Harrison. What a fantastic room to be listening in on. Just a little bit of a background. When I was younger, my mom had me at an orthodontist at a young age due to recommendations from a doctor. I was a very heavy mouth breather. The orthodontist I remember hearing him kind of pull my mom to the side and discuss with her about wanting to break and reset my jaw, which thankfully my mother said, absolutely not. That's absurd. You're not breaking my child's jaw. So I did, I ended up getting actually surgery to remove my tonsils and my adenoids, which I was told at the time I had, as an 8 or 9-year-old, tonsils larger than most full grown adult men, to the point where they brought medical staff in and medical students to look down my throat before my tonsils were removed. But I do remember waking up in the hospital actually feeling what it felt like to breathe through my nose for the first time, to really truly be able to take a breath. And then I spent about 3.5 years with braces, headgear. And so my question for you is, as an adult, I'm in my late 40s now. As an adult, I still find myself at night feeling like my tongue just is uncomfortable and is not resting, properly in my mouth. It's almost like sometimes I feel like it's strained and I don't know where to consciously or unconsciously place it, I guess. Is that a common thing for mouth breathers from such a young age? Like that. So that's my question for you. And is there anything I could do to maybe relax or help it? This is Heather, and I'm done speaking. Thank you.
Go for it, Carly.
Okay. So just because tonsils and adenoids are removed does not mean you instantly start to nasal breathe and swallow correctly, unfortunately. I never see it happen. I'm sure it happens once in a while. It'd be really wonderful if our ENTs would get on board with us a little bit more and and still ensure that goes a child or an adult goes right to some breathing consulting. We just haven't. We're all seem to be slipping, and there's so many people who don't know how to breathe. When I say don't know how to breathe, swallow is such a big part of it. And the breathing is so complex too, because we're all a little bit too much in sympathetic nervous system. So when you mouth breathe, to sum it up quickly, your airways, all your tubes constrict. I'm so sorry, constrict. So you can get, if your tongue's blocking, if your tongue was never taught to go up, that's a reflex behavior that has to be instilled to your brainstem. And you started off with big tonsils, so you probably had to get in the habit of mouth breathing. And then you just never developed this little sequence that I described a minute ago where your tongue has to lift up 2,000 times a day. It has to be an automatic behavior, just like you blinked a minute ago. So that really, unless somebody kind of stumbles upon somebody like me, it really never gets completely organized, especially the back part of the tongue, which is the heaviest part to get up there. And that's the part that usually affects our sleep apnea breathing patients. When you lay down, it just drops back into the airway and occludes the airway. And that's the OSA, obstructive sleep apnea, is the tongue and the surrounding muscles that support the tongue all collapse into the airway because we're not using that part of our body. We've disconnected from it. We don't know it's there really. It's kind of foreign. So it's just lazy and collapses. Sorry, that's my puppy behind me squeaking a toy. I'm going to take it away from her. I don't know if you hear her. But anyway, so as an adult, the tongue grows bigger when you don't use it properly. That's number one. It grows laterally to the sides, gets wider. It does all sorts of compensations. And probably what might have happened to you is your tongue might have just grown a little bit longer and bigger. But the good thing is tongues are reshapeable. I do it every day, all day long. They're just, I kind of use the analogy, it's like a jellyfish. If you give it a container, it will take on the shape of a container. So we give the container the palate and we start moving it and it gets a lot more exercise. It goes from laying low and moving forward or laterally, which is not much movement, to lifting up. The whole tongue usually is very heavy and then rolling and dancing across the roof of the mouth all day long. And then if we lift it down to talk or eat, or it's going to fly right back up like a magnet when we're done. So that takes a ton of inherent strength. And in creating that natural movement, tones your tongue. And I don't know, they just reshape. It just happens. I've not once not been able to get a tongue up in a palate. So it probably just you need a little work, I would think, would be my.
Michelle, did you have anything you wanted to add? If not, we'll move on to
I
Linda.
want to make sure people know how to reach Carly because I send her information around quite a bit. And I had her on, I have a study group where we kind of do some academic investigations and socializing on Facebook. And I've had her on a few times, but because I'm thinking, versus one-on-one, wouldn't it be great if we could sort of learn collectively these common issues? And patterns are so individual. And for anyone with any complexity, I think a thorough, formal orofacialmyologic evaluation is really a wonderful thing to have access to. So
Perfect. Thank you, Carly. Thank
Sure.
you for summarizing that. And I think it's a good circle and end to this chat today, guys. Thank you for being here, Carly and Michelle, and all the people who have come up and asked questions. Heather, Linda, Ingrid, Gina, and all the people down the audience. Thank you for listening. We will be doing this again. So Michelle and Carly, please shoot me a message and we'll organize a time because I mean, just from me being here, I've learned a lot and I'm sure that everyone else has also. So I want to keep the discussion going. If you guys want to be notified about when we do this again, the best way to do that is follow the moderators and also follow the club itself so you can be notified. And also check out Instagram and notifications on there. I'm going to throw it back to you, Michelle and Carly, if they wanted to end with anything. If not, we'll close the room down.